Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the Gospel of Luke today, and we're in Luke chapter 5, and I'll begin reading with verse 12. Luke chapter 5, of course, begins with Jesus preaching on the Sea of Galilee and calling Simon and his fishing buddies, his partners, to become disciples. And they leave everything on the beach and follow Jesus. And we have this wonderful conversion moment where Simon understands who he is and who Jesus is and what Jesus has called him to do. Okay, um, chapter 5, verse 12, we have the healing of a leper. In Matthew's gospel, this happens immediately after the Sermon on the Mount. Luke doesn't put a timestamp on this event, it's just something that happened during the ministry of Jesus. And that's the way he has organized his gospel. We'll see in the coming sessions that he's taking a page from Mark in, in stringing together a series of narrative events that demonstrate Jesus running afoul of the religious authorities. And this is really the first one, even though there's no one there to object. We get the picture that Jesus is not going to play by their rules. So, Luke chapter 5, we're going to be reading verses 12 through 16. And it came about that while he was in one of the cities, behold, there was a man full of leprosy. And when he saw Jesus, he fell on his face and implored him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And he stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately the leprosy left him. And he ordered him to tell no one, but go and show yourself to the priest and make an offering for your cleansing, just as Moses commanded, for a testimony to them. But the news about him was spreading even further, and great multitudes were gathering to hear him and to be healed of their sickness. But he himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray. This is an important passage, and it's one that gets reported in the other synoptic gospels as well. If you want to know what the rules were, what the law was about lepers and how they were to conduct themselves, um, you can look at Leviticus chapter 14. The entire chapter, verses 1 through 32, is about just this. That the fact that the man was this close to Jesus and did not in any way announce himself as unclean is a violation of Leviticus chapter 14. Although it's clear that he is a leprous person, he's covered. He's full of leprosy. Does that mean Hansen's disease? We don't know. They didn't have the same taxonomy that we have. They didn't have the same technology or medical understanding that we have. Although it's probably likely they had some knowledge that we wish we still had that has not been preserved. Um, but they until they knew differently, they had to lump everything under the heading of leprosy, contact dermatitis, or allergies, psoriasis, different things that are not leprosy were all lumped together because until quite recently there was no cure for Hansen's disease, which is what we call leprosy. He says to Jesus, um, if you are willing, you can make me clean. This is an expression of faith. He has no doubt Jesus can heal him. The question is, will Jesus be willing to do so? Um, why would he say that? Does he doubt Jesus' compassion? Some commentators over the centuries have tried to say this man doubts Jesus' own compassion. But I think reading what we've just read from Peter, linking these two stories together, because nothing is random in piecing together this gospel. This is a man who doubts his own worthiness. Um, the if is not about Jesus, it's about him. Um, this man's contemporaries would have assumed that he was struck with leprosy because of sin, the way King Uzzah was back in the Old Testament, and that's going to factor in these stories that are linked together. These healing accounts that are linked together here in chapters 5 and 6. And so I think the hesitation on his part is about his own worthiness, not Jesus' willingness. And Jesus just says, I am willing, be healed. And then he touched him, which he did not have to do. We know this. Jesus can heal over distances, Jesus can speak it and it happens. But he touched this man. Commentators for hundreds of years have mentioned this as well, how important the human touch is, and how important it was for Jesus to validate this man's cleanness by touching him. Jesus is also validating his authority over all these issues that we face, and that he himself is not made unclean by touching this leper. This is not Jesus in any way trying to violate the law. In fact, he insists upon the law being observed because he says, don't talk to anybody about this. You go straight to the priest, you do everything the law of Moses tells you to do to get yourself declared clean. This is going to not only be observant of the law, which is in force at this time, but also to serve notice to the priests that someone has this power to heal. Um, and it didn't keep word about him from spreading because it did. However, he himself would frequently slip off to pray. We're going to talk about that one verse next time. It's such an important verse. And we'll focus on Jesus taking personal prayer time in his life and how necessary it was. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes. We'll talk about verse 16 next time.